We sit watching our TVs while some local newscaster tells us that today we had 15 homicides and 63 violent crimes, as if that's the way it's supposed to be. We know things are bad, worse than bad. They're crazy. It's like everything everywhere is going crazy, so we don't go out anymore. We sit in the house, and slowly the world we're living in is getting smaller, and all we say is, please, at least leave us alone in our living rooms. Let me have my toaster and my TV and my steel-belted radios, and I won't say anything. Just leave us alone. Well, I'm not going to leave you alone.
In every revolution, there's one man with a vision.
Captain Kirk, I shall consider it.
I've been a participant in some of the most insidious lies and witnessed to deeds that no crazed man could imagine. I spent years watching you from my lofty position to know that you were the one I could trust.
And why did you lie to me?
There still exist some secrets which should remain secret. Truths that people are just not ready to know.
Who are you to decide that?
The world's reaction to such knowledge would be far too dangerous.
Dangerous? You mean in the sense of outrage? Like the reaction to the Kennedy assassination, or MIAs, or radiation experiments on terminal patients, Watergate, Iran-Contra, Roswell, the Tuskegee experiments. Where will it end?
You want answers? I think I'm entitled. You want answers? I want the truth! You can't handle the truth! Get out!
Or what? You'll kill me?
Always remember, dissension's the greatest form of patriotism.
The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society. And we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies.
We have before us the opportunity to forge a new world order.
Yes, we can. And you say.
Let us never tolerate outrageous conspiracy theories.
A lie is most convincingly hidden between two truths.
Well, I guess it won't end.
No! I don't have time for this. This is about saving the future of humanity.
We know things are bad, worse than bad. We know the air is unfit to breathe and our food is unfit to eat. I don't want you to protest. I don't want you to write to your congressman because I wouldn't know what to tell you to write. I don't know what to do about the depression and the inflation and the crime in the street. All I know is that first, you've got to get mad.
The line must be drawn here. This far, no farther.
I want you to get up right now. Go to your windows, open them, and stick your head out and yell, I'm a human being. My life has value, and I'm not going to take this anymore.
You shall not pass!
You're listening to the Revolutionary Radio Project with your host, Rob Skiba.
Hello, and thank you for listening to the Revolutionary Radio Project. I am your host, Rob Skiba. I felt like putting two of the extended intros there because one thing does indeed lead to another, and that was my kind of extended conspiracy theory type intro, which coincidentally turned out to be 3 minutes and 33 seconds long. Anyway, it is my privilege to welcome tonight to the show Brian Ingram. It's kind of interesting how we met on December 21st, 2010. My wife and I, we are both late night people. We stay up late, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning most days of the week. And we decided to go for a walk. It was a little after 2 o'clock that night. And about 2:22 in the morning, looked up and saw a blood-red moon floating over the shoulders of Orion, the constellation Orion, like a decapitated head. and it took 72 minutes for this blood red lunar eclipse to go full cycle. And I was looking up at this, and of course the nature of the research and things that I've been doing for SEED really made every single alarm go off in my head, and I started writing some things, and somebody had posted on Facebook, have you checked the internet seismic servers? And had posted a video showing how literally every seismic server on the planet had gone black. The little needle was just going crazy on all the seismic servers. So essentially the entire planet shook that night. And at the same time that was happening here on Central Standard Time at 2:22 in the morning, that was 3:22 on the East Coast. And anybody who does any research into secret societies knows that 3:22 is a pretty significant number in the secret society circles like the Skull and Bones Society, of which both George Bush Sr. and Jr. were a part of. And at the same time that was taking place here, the nation of Iraq was announcing its new government had fully formed. And I was like, oh, brother. Anybody who does any research on Orion will find the connection pretty quickly between Orion, the mighty hunter constellation, and Nimrod, the mighty hunter of our scriptures. And, of course, Nimrod built the Tower of Babel, which is in Babylon in Iraq. So, and according to the book of Joshua, Nimrod had his head cut off by Esau. And so here's this decapitated head floating over the mighty hunter as the nation of Iraq is announcing its fully formed government, and the entire planet shook. And so I posted that, all those peculiar facts on Tom Horn's Facebook page, and I guess Brian Ingram was also a friend of Tom Horn, so he saw that, and it wasn't long before he and I started to engage in Facebook communication. And then, of course, we've been making some of the blog talk radio circuit separately. And so I thought, you know what, I'm just going to have him on my show tonight, and nothing formal. I don't have any real agenda for this evening except to just talk with my internet buddy, Brian Ingram, who's done a lot of the same types of research that I've been doing. And he's got a blog that he just put out recently, Canst Thou Bind the Sweet Influence of the Pleiades or Loose the Bands of Orion. So I'm anxious to talk to him about that. I'm going to go ahead and make him live right now. Brian, you are on the air. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hey. Thank you for being on the show tonight.
Yeah, thanks for being on.
So that's my side of the story. What's your side of the story? What was going through your head on December 21st, 2010?
Well, it was earlier that day. I was in prayer earlier that day for one, and the Lord just basically, he started telling me, impressing upon me, we are about to go into that time where our robes are going to be washed white. And I don't know, I didn't really think too much of it, and I received a letter in my Facebook mail earlier that night, and my friend asked me, what do you make of this eclipse? And I looked at it, and the first thing that struck me is this is on the winter solstice.
Right.
Okay, we've got this blood red moon, basically, that going through all the phases. I saw the 72, and immediately some alarms started going off. And it took me a little bit to remember exactly what 72 meant. And then, I thought about it for a little bit, and all of a sudden it hit me, the 72 gates, the 72 that are bound, loosed, like according to the Capitol Dome with the stars and so forth. And that alone just told me something here, something's going on. And I found out just a little bit later that it was in Orion. And, like you had said, too, the first thing that hit me about that was you got a Nimrod connection. Now, it was later in the night when I had looked back on Tom Horn's wall that I saw, you had put up, it appears as a bloody red head over the top of Orion, and that's when it sunk in, and that's when it hit me full blown, and I just, right then and there, I understood it, and, putting that in place with what I heard in prayer that night, it was an absolute signal saying, all right, it's starting.
Yeah.
And, it has ever since. It's just, things have gone on a real roller coaster since that night.
It's weird. I know you mess around with Stellarium quite a bit, too. And I don't know if you've taken Stellarium back to September 11th, 2 BC or not, but if you haven't, you should check that out. The alignment that happens on September 11th, funny, of -2, or 2 BC, is virtually identical to the description given in Revelation. But the sun is in Virgo. Actually, if you back it off to about August 28th, and you know how you can step forward the time? You can click forward time.
Yeah.
If you just step it forward like each day, then what happens is, if you orient yourself so that west is on your right side of the screen, so it's like you're facing south. And so west is on the right side of the screen, and east is on your left. The moon comes from the west and starts tracing across the sky. Meanwhile, Jupiter positions itself right over Regulus. So you got the king planet over the king star in the Leo Lion constellation, the kind of the king constellation, I guess you'd say. So you got triple kings on top of each other. As the moon gets closer, as you step forward from August 28th, 29th or so, it starts getting closer. You see Venus, the queen of heaven, popping herself right on top of the king of heaven, or the king planet. So you got the queen planet and the king planet on top of each other, on top of the king star in the king constellation. Just as the moon crosses over on top of all of that, it's like Venus chases the moon, and as she chases the moon, Mercury, the messenger of the gods, pops up behind Venus and sits himself over Venus, and then the two of them position themselves in the upper torso of Virgo, and if you just kind of move the horizon over so you can see what's going on over there, you see Mercury and Venus in the upper torso of Virgo. You see the sun in her belly, and there's a crescent moon, new moon, at her feet. And so I'm like, that has to be what the Magi saw. I mean, the alignments are just absolutely extraordinary. And so I'm like, okay, I'm thinking if our calendars are off by 2 years, could it be that all this 2012 hoopla really happened about 6 months ago? Or 5 months ago, whatever it is.
I have been thinking that too. I have really been thinking the same thing. There is, I ran the Stellarium the other night, and I did take a look at December 21st, 2012. And the reason I did this, I wanted to try to line something up and look at this this Masonic Key of Solomon that they're using, because it shows the pillar, so that the pillar is sitting at approximately 33 degrees, and you have the moon, and then you have the Pleiades at 33-degree angle. So I ran that, and I wanted to look at what it was that they were trying to, what it is they're trying to show on there. And when I pulled it up, now the picture is one of the last ones in my blog down near where I'm talking about 2012. So when I pulled this up, in that same arc with the moon, going to the Pleiades, and then going in that same arc is Jupiter sitting right above it. So, I have not exactly put the pieces together of what all that means, but I did find that rather strange that Jupiter is sitting right above there.
Yeah, it's amazing because, when you're looking at the creation account, it says that God put all these things for signs and for seasons and for days and years and for all that stuff. But it literally is, I think the book of Enoch refers to it as the heavenly tablets, or the tablets of the sky that Enoch essentially figured out. that the whole story, or as we would say, history, his story, is literally written in the sky. And when you start following, I'm not talking about astrology or anything like that. I'm talking about the science of God. And my take on all of this is that wherever you see a counterfeit, I start looking for the real thing, because they don't counterfeit $3 bills. They counterfeit $100 bills because they're real $100 bills. So things like astrology, if astrology and horoscopes and all that is the counterfeit, then what's the real? You want to talk about Mazzaroth a little bit? What's your take on Mazzaroth?
Well, it's basically how astronomy stars were set by the Lord in their proper seasons and the proper signs that go into that. And it's, an absolutely 100% accurate time clock within its workings. And it's just the precision of it it's really astonishing. The more that you just dig into it and look at how these ancient cultures especially were able to measure all of these things according to that. Now, I received that book last night, Wheel of the Stars. And
Wheel of Stars?
Yeah, I started reading some of that last night and paged through a few different things. And I can really see just from the beginning of this that I have to learn a lot of this over again. And he brings up some pretty interesting points in there, so I don't really want to go too into that right now until I further study this out. But he did make one comment that kind of had me stop and wonder, because he made the comment about, which constellations are the real ones. And this did get me thinking a little more about, because you've got those 3 constellations that are mentioned within Job, but you don't really see those mentioned as constellations according to what we commonly today.
Right.
There's definitely some more research that has to go into this.
Now, you were just talking about the book by his last name's Roth. Is it Gabriel?
Yeah,
Andrew Gabriel Roth. Yeah,
yep.
he's also done, he's done the translation of the Aramaic English New Testament, which I just got. We had a copy given to us, but my wife and I have been kind of wrestling with each other who gets to look at it. She's won. She has spent a lot of time reading through it, and I've just been able to see bits and pieces of it and read some of the footnotes, which are extraordinary. But I got my copy today, so now we both have our own copy. The problem is, we can't share books because we both like to highlight and annotate, and so we really got to type in. But he's done some extraordinary work, and I think that this is all part of it. It's like seek and you shall find. Before we were seeking, we didn't know much, but as we start to seek and as we start to look into these things, it literally is like scales are falling from our eyes and veils are being removed, and deeper revelation builds upon deeper revelation, and then we uncover more revelation. It's like it never ends.
Yeah, I agree. I just, since this eclipse, the lunar eclipse alone, it has just really caused me to dig even deeper into Scripture, because, we start seeing end-time prophecies starting to be fulfilled. And, the area that concerned me the most is I was asking myself, what is it that I've missed here? What am I not grasping according to the way that normal eschatology is taught? I want to understand what's really going to take place and what's really going on and what to really watch for. And since I've been doing this, I'm coming to a lot of different conclusions than what I have heard commonly taught over the years.
Yeah. I'm a Star Wars fan. I love Star Wars. And there's, especially Empire Strikes Back. That's my favorite of all. I love Empire, and there's so much in the training sequence with Luke and Yoda that I think is really applicable to our walk with Christ and just in how God works in general. And one of the things Yoda has to say to Luke, he says, you're going to have to unlearn what you have learned. Essentially, okay, Luke, if you want to get this Force stuff, you're going to have to unlearn what you've learned. And, man, that's kind of what I feel like where we're at right now. It's like I've almost had to just say, okay, everything that I've been taught, I'm going to have to trash it and start from scratch. And, we all approach the Scriptures with some level of preconceived ideas based on things that we were taught or heard or read in the past. But I've really tried lately to just kind of say, okay, let's pretend this is the first time I'm looking at this. What do I see? And, man, I see a lot of different things than what I was taught.
Yeah, that's the exact same thing that's been happening to me. And I agree. That was the biggest step I had to make was unlearning every single thing and starting from scratch. And I even had a point today when I was reading through this commentary in this Aramaic English New Testament. After reading through some of the different scripture in there, I decided to take a look at the back of it. And I came to this breaking point where I said, Lord, I don't know anything. I give up and I want to learn everything from you. It was kind of a hard spot to actually come to. And, sometimes our head knowledge really can get the best of us.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Absolutely. All right, let's back up. You just wrote a blog, Canst Thou Bind the Sweet Influence of the Pleiades, and got on Steve Quayle's front page, man. How's that feel?
Feels really good. I was pretty shocked when it happened.
Yeah, that happened to me, I want to say a month ago, I guess. I averaged probably 150 to 200 hits a day on my website, and I check it every day, and all of a sudden my stat counter went up 6,000 hits in one day. And I'm going, 6,000? I'm like, this has to be a typo. What's going on here? So I started to check to see where everybody was coming from, because it shows me entry links where people come from to get to my site. And it was saying Steve Quayle and Tom Horns, actually Raiders news update. I'm like, whoa, because that was when I posted the blog, Nimrod, Nibiru, and the Anunnaki, and it was the night before. Actually, you had a hand in that one. That was the night I had just posted it, the night that the Japanese earthquake went off. And I was literally about to sign off on my computer, about to shut my computer off, and you popped up on my Facebook. Hey, have you seen the news? I'm like, no. So I checked the news, and of course everybody's going crazy about the Japanese earthquake, which the seismic servers also were going off literally all over the planet. It wasn't just Japan. And then for whatever reason, I guess because everybody was thinking about Comet Elenin and all of that stuff, the Ides of March, everybody's thinking about that stuff. So I guess, I posted something on my blog, and, Tom Horn picked it up first, and then Steve Quayle, and all of a sudden, poof, I hit 30,000 hits just that 1 month alone on my website. So
that's amazing.
That's my prayer for you, man, is just keep doing it, because all of us, we have a part in this. It's like I get revelation, you got revelation, Tom's got revelation, Steve's got revelation, Dory's got revelation, everybody's got revelation, Matt Miller. And, what I love about these blog talk shows is that we get a chance to sit down and just chat with each other and see what we're learning, and I can pick up things from you, you can pick up things from me, and hopefully together, all of us, the body of Christ working together, can piece this puzzle together in such a way that everybody else can clearly see.
Oh, absolutely.
And so when I saw that you got on Steve's the other day, I was like, whoo-hoo, all right. Good for you, man.
Oh, it was a great experience, and it was real humbling at the same time. I've gone through and I've done quite a bit of work now, revising and kind of adding in some new information as I went along here. So I'm really learning a lot through this process now too. What was something that sparked my attention is, we had talked too, that weekend you had done those 2 shows on Blog Talk when we got together and talked on your radio show. And it really was pretty amazing how that little flash forward hint was sitting in there, and then the Fukushima plant just happened to have its first explosion that day. The media just really likes to play us along here and give us these little hints. And you just have to wonder sometimes if it's either intentional or is it by accident. You just don't, sometimes it is intentional, but there's other times that it was real interesting how that happened. For a while there I was thinking, okay, maybe it's just coincidence. But I was, back in the early 90s, I was part of an acting troupe that traveled all around the country. I was with Alvin and the Chipmunks. So I was David Seville going around all over the country at civic centers and state fairs and stuff. Alvin! That was me. But I was in New Jersey, and one of the roadies that was on tour with us, we were loading up a truck, and we were talking about something, coincidence, and he says, coincidence, my mom always told me coincidence is God being anonymous. And so I've always remembered what that guy said and thought about it. But when it comes to some of these memes that are showing up, you can go all the way back, you can go way back, but really X-Files was just loaded with them. And what I've begun to realize is God said in the scriptures that he doesn't do anything but that he first tells his prophets. It's like whatever God's going to do, he telegraphs it to his prophets. And so what I began to wonder is if that is, in fact, probably a law of the universe, like gravity. It's if something's going to happen on Earth, it has to be telegraphed first. And if the fallen are bound by the same rules of the universe that God seems to have established, then just like God has to tell his prophets first before he does something, I'm thinking the devil has to tell the world first before he can. It's like the vampire lore. A vampire can't come in until you invite him, and so he'll try to find sneaky ways to make you inadvertently, through deception, invite him in. That they put this talisman in our pockets, by putting the symbols on the back of the dollar bill. So really, we're essentially, by walking around with dollar bills, we're sanctioning the New World Order's plans. And I think it's the same way when they put it in the media, because right now they're not even trying to hide it anymore. It's so in your face. Wow, it's crazy. One thing, right now, have you noticed the other phraseology that they keep using with this flooding that's going to the Mississippi? And this has me concerned, because we've had, when the Bin Laden thing happened, that was so loaded it was unreal. Yeah, now they're using the term floodgates. And this was the idea of one of the chapters I was going to name later on, was opening the floodgates. And now I keep hearing that phrase over and over and over again on the news. And it's, when we pay attention to these little strange phrasings that they'll start using, it just gives you sort of an insight into what's going on and what possibly could be happening here. And it just, there's a lot of strange things taking place right now. I'm really taking notice, because if my theory is true that they have to telegraph it first, when you think about everything they're telegraphing, and it's on everything, man, everywhere you look. I was writing episode 2 of Seed, and there's a scene at the last scene of episode 2. After I wrote it, I had to it freaked me out. I wrote it, but it freaked me out, because I was thinking about Revelation 16:16 or Revelation 19:19, where the nations of the world are gathered together to make war with God. And I was thinking, okay, well, I was in the Army for 8 years, and I know how war works. You build weapons that will work
cross the distances or do whatever it has to do for it to work on your enemy. So I was thinking, if God is a spirit, and these people are trying to make war with God, then they have to create weapons that could theoretically work against the spirit. So I went with that assumption. And then I wrote this scene where there's a character, and I forget his name off the top of my head. It's been a while now, but one of the named fallen angels that's recorded in the Book of Enoch is credited for teaching people how to kill the baby in the womb, basically the first abortions. But he also had taught people the art of essentially messing with spirits, messing with the spirit, wounding the spirit. And I thought to myself, okay, what if I have this guy, this character, in Seed Episode 2, and he's essentially extracting the spirit out of a human and putting it into a container, like a containment field. And that does two things. First of all, it creates a shell of the body for which the Nephilim could enter, but also it puts the spirits in this containment field where they can do experiments on it to try to hurt or kill or do away with the spirit in an effort to build the weapons necessary for Revelation 16:16 and Revelation 19:19. So I wrote this scene, and it freaked me out, and I was really tempted to just erase it, because it was pretty hardcore the way it's written. And God clearly in that same day gave me 3 different confirmations from 3 different people who knew nothing about what I wrote, but the things that they said essentially confirmed in my spirit. God said, no, you keep that in there. Okay, I kept it in there. Well, a couple of days later, maybe a week or so later, episode of V comes on, and the main character there, the V chick, Diana, I think her name is, she's in the Vatican. And she's walking around the Vatican, and she starts to ask, what is the soul? What's the deal with the soul? She sees all these pictures of people in purgatory and heaven and whatnot. And one of the characters tells her, well, that's the life force that lives forever, when the body dies. And so she becomes obsessed with this super powerful thing called the soul and wants to know more about it. So the end of the episode is she's got this body, a human, in this on this table, and they're extracting the person's soul. And I'm like, oh my God, I just wrote that like a week ago. And then a couple of weeks later, Fringe has an episode where Leonard Nimoy's character, William Bell, has died, and Walter finds a folder that William Bell had done some experiments on soul magnets. And essentially, through some sort of subterfuge, he got Olivia to drink these soul magnets. And so when he died, kind of like Star Trek 2, when he put his Ka into Dr. McCoy, in Part 3 he had to get it out of Dr. McCoy. Well, in Fringe, Leonard Nimoy's soul goes into Olivia through these soul magnets. So I'm going, okay, there's something to this, because and there was another show that came out, same thing. And actually, Sheila and I got Netflix, and I was geeking out on a lot of the old 70s and 80s shows we grew up with, and I was watching Buck Rogers, the old Buck Rogers, and there was an episode of Space Vampires, and there's this whole dialogue about how these space vampires suck the souls out of people. And I'm going, man, so like within a month of me writing episode 2, I had all these other shows. I'm going, okay, this is real. It's not sci-fi. And that means they're doing stuff like that. I started listening to Doug Riggs and some of his stuff with the SRA, DID, and all that kind of stuff. And I'm going, man, we've got to wake up and realize that what we call science fiction really isn't. This stuff is real.
Yeah, it definitely is. It started out with some concepts that may have seemed a little bit off the wall at first, and now we're starting to see them come to pass. Rephi-M is one of the areas that I've been slowly working towards, trying to comprehend some of this, because you've got this concept of the spirit being raised. And
You there? I think you faded out.
Am I?
Still have you. There you are.
All right, must be where I'm sitting. They were doing things in Egypt, for instance, where they were mummifying these pharaohs to keep these bodies intact. And when you look through some of those rituals, they are very, very intensive. And what was it, a few months ago, they started talking about raising these mammoths, raising these mummies with the DNA.
Yes. And
it's really got me thinking a lot about how much of this ancient technology that we have seen had something to do with, like, that concept from Fringe with these soul magnets. Yeah. And we see that, too, with mythological creatures, this mix between half man and human to create this shell, pretty much, so that something could go inside of it. And they could basically raise this spirit, put the spirit into this thing.
Right.
So it is definitely, there's something going on there, and it really is, it's a difficult thing to understand, and this is one thing I've been wondering about the Mark of the Beast, is a few ideas have been brought forward over time here with manipulation of the genetic code, literally taking the mark of the beast to become like a beast, and then the reference to a seal or a sigil. And what I started thinking is, what if you combine the two? You've got something that's a calling card to bring in a spirit into the body, and you have something that manipulates the DNA itself so that you create this open vessel.
Yeah.
So it's something I've been wondering about.
Well, this whole Ophiuchus deal, it's really interesting. I was listening to Dory's show the other day. Dory, great show, by the way. I don't know if it was a recent show or if it was an old show, but you were talking about Ophiuchus. He was based on a real, he's one of the few legends or myths out there that's actually based on a real guy. But according to mythology, he was Asclepius. And he was given the power to restore the dead back to life. And one of the dead that he brought back to life was Orion. And after that, he got so excited about bringing Orion back that he basically started emptying Hades, and Hades was getting pretty upset about it, And so I started thinking about the theory we have regarding Nimrod, which is Orion. And, here's Asclepius in the sky, Ophiuchus. I always get I'm not sure how to pronounce his name, but here this new zodiac shows up just in time for all the craziness that's happened since 12/21/10. And when you're looking at the trumpets, and it says that, the seals, the fourth seal is the fourth horseman, whose rider is death, and Hades follows close behind. I'm going, all right. Like you said, for years now we've been hearing about, let's clone the mammoths. And then all of a sudden they start talking about cloning the pharaohs. And it's like, what are these guys practicing for? Who are they getting ready to finally do this experiment on?
That's the exact same thing I've been thinking as well, just watching all these different things that have been going on with genetics. And there was another thing that you brought up, too, with the spiritual weapons. Revelation 16 and 19 you were talking about?
Yes.
Another thing that I've really been just kind of thinking over as well is if we look at that situation in Jasher, when they built the Tower of Babel and they literally tried to storm the heavens through the gate. Right. And this has gotten me thinking some other thoughts along those lines, too, because we had Babylon, the original Babylon, where that original Akkadian gate of God for the Tower of Babel stood. And it's just gotten me wondering about a few things, about standing where he ought not be. It's thinking a little bit outside the box, but you really do have to wonder if there's something more going on here that we're not fully, I don't think we're going to fully grasp it until we see the events take place.
Yeah.
But there is something going on to that, because this is it's going to be a very real spiritual situation that's going to be confronting us in the days to come.
You know, the last blog I did, I split one of my blogs in half because it got way too long, but and it needed to be separated. But which you're learning as well, in some of your blogs, the need sometimes to separate things out. But my last one, the tribulation period, 7-year tribulation period, with the Nephilim in mind. I've never seen anybody, there may be others out there, but I haven't seen them put together a timeline with the Nephilim equation inserted into it. And when you put the Nephilim equation in, everything changes, and it paints a much different picture. And my wife and I went for a walk the other night, and we were just talking about the same thing you just mentioned about the Joshua account of the Tower of Babel, and the fact that, even in the Genesis account, the way it's worded, it almost sounds like, I know God's not afraid, but the way it's worded, it almost sounds like he is. It's like, whoa, look what they're doing. Now anything that they imagine won't be restrained from them. We better go mess up their language and separate this whole thing. And in the Joshua account, it specifically says that Nimrod had 3 camps of people that each had assignments when they got there. One was to assault heaven with bows and spears. One was to kill God. One was to set up their gods in the Holy of Holies in heaven. And basically, what I was thinking, especially if we go with the line of thought that Tom Horn has regarding Nimrod becoming a Gabborim not in the sense of just a mighty man like David's people, but a Gabborim in the sense of a giant, that somehow through some kind of genetic manipulation, tampering, retrovirus, something, he began to become a son of the Nephilim. It seems to me that if you think of it this way, God's got the controls up there in heaven. He's got the big, soundboard that the frequencies that make everything be. That God put the Nephilim and their parents, in the prisons, and we can talk about that in a minute too. The various prisons that are there, Tartarus being one of them. That Nimrod seems to have risen to such a point in his zeal, in his arrogance, in his genetics, in every way, that Lucifer said, "Ooh, I can work with this guy." It seems like he was going to go into heaven, take over, and then release his forefathers. Like, I'm going to go to heaven, I'm going to reset everything. And apparently whatever he was creating there in Babel, at least in theory, it looks like could have happened. And may happen again.
Well, this is something that I'm really starting to see that it is going to be an absolute repeat of time. As in the days of Noah, question itself. Now, I was looking at the translation of it today in Aramaic, and it's stated in that translation in such a way that you can't even miss that this is the same thing replaying again. There's just absolutely no question with this translation. And it makes the comment then about, it's the reference to the angels taking the daughters of men again. And then you see the women marry the men, and it almost looks like, to a degree, that we have this giant situation taking place all over again in the midst of it too. And there's some really, really interesting things going on with this. And two is another thing I noticed is if you look at that bowl covenant, and then look at the coming of this, the sign of the coming of the Son of Man. And I was thinking this over a little bit more the other night, and it dawned on me. The flood got done, and then you have the same, the bowl covenant, pretty much. As you see it in Revelation, it shows another spot where an angel is standing with a rainbow over the top of its head. Yeah. And it's interesting because there's another replay of that. so you just have to really, really pay attention to everything that takes place in definitely in Genesis. You're going to unlock everything that's going to be happening here.
Are you familiar with the term rakia?
Say that again?
Are you familiar with the term rakia?
Rakia?
I think that's the term. Anyway, it's if I've got it right, it's the Hebrew word used to describe the canopy that used to be surrounding Earth, and it essentially, we all talk about it, the waters from the waters, separating the waters, that it was a water vapor canopy, but the word actually has more of a metallic definition to it. That essentially, however, I don't know how it works, but essentially the water was so compressed or whatever, there was almost like a metallic canopy around the Earth. And when I started thinking about what's the deal with all these chemtrails, I know there's a lot of theories out there regarding it, and I know a lot of the damage that it is causing, but one of the things that they're putting up there is aluminum and barium and a whole bunch of other stuff. But I got to thinking, what if they're actually trying to recreate essentially another metallic canopy for whatever frequency? I mean, it must have something to do with some kind of frequency deal.
That's something. That was a question I had when I started looking into the scalar technology. And I started wondering about that actual thing itself to see if they were putting those sorts of metals inside of chemtrails that they're spraying about. And so I typed in some different variations into the search engine, and I got up a page that showed that they use this and they're arcing the different frequencies back down.
Right.
With basically putting metallic things within air. And I don't recall, I think that was Stitchin's theory talking about putting gold in the atmosphere to fix the ozone, etc.
Yes.
So there's some kind of ancient technology. They've gotten their hands on something again. I would really strongly suspect. It's that the more you start looking at all of this, it's all about this ancient technology and all these different places that they're going to, and they'll find something, and then the military is coming in and completely removing everybody and taking everything out. This happened with Gilgamesh's tomb, and now the same thing has happened in the pyramid. They locked the place down. They found something there, too.
Yeah. Yeah, they're definitely, they appear to be on a time schedule that, here's the thing. We know what the end is because it's written. Well, if we know what the end is, then the enemy knows what the end is too. And one of the things Sheila and I were talking about the other day as we were walking is so much of this so-called natural disasters that we're seeing today, I think there's a lot of evidence out there that's pointing to it being more man-made than it is natural. The Japanese earthquake, the Katrina. I mean, there's so many things out there. If you really dig into this stuff and don't watch mainstream media, it seems like the proof is almost overwhelming that these things are man-made. So the question is, well, why are they doing these things? Okay, we got the Georgia Guidestones. We know they're trying to kill 6 billion people so they have their dream of 500 million. I get that. But what if, God's entire schedule of events works on two things, the Mazzaroth and the feasts, the 7 feasts of God that we see in the Torah. Now, the feasts seem to be pretty heavily dependent on, especially the moon, but the heavens, but in particular the moon. So I got to thinking, okay, if God is bound by His own script, if I can, think of this in terms of a movie, God's written the script, and His script is dependent on the alignments of the stars, the constellations, and specifically how the feasts line up with things like the moon. Then if you are a military strategist and you know that that's what your enemy's plan is, you would do everything you can to try to disrupt that plan, which would mean What if you could destroy either the moon so it can't pop up when it's supposed to, or you could shift the Earth in such a way that the alignments won't work? And, maybe blowing up the moon isn't quite practical at the moment, but shifting the Earth certainly is, and we're seeing it ever since December 21st. The poles are shifting. The moon looks weird now. It's apparently somehow out of whack. Not that the moon is, but I think maybe just our view of it is. But if they're changing the way the Earth rotates and everything else, then it would throw off the alignment of the stars and the moon. Do you follow what I'm saying? That maybe that's what the devil's trying to do.
Actually, this is something I'm wondering about. Is this pole shifting going on? Is this intentional? If you look at CERN put in that telescope not too long ago that basically stretches Sweden through the Arctic, and drilling in through the Earth and coming through the core like that, and it's just beam technology. It's some of the stuff that's going on with that thing is just I have no way of understanding it. The physics involved is just it's really. I can't even think of how to describe it. And I started to wonder, are they trying to knock the pole off course? We've had 3 pole shifts now in the last year.
I know. That's what's making me think this. That it is intentional, because these pole shifts were the result of what appears to be, the Christchurch earthquake, all of them, Chile. Japan, all of these things seem to be strategically placed events. Even the miners. I mean, what a load of crap. Excuse my language.
Yeah.
But, the Phoenix and all of the numbers are there, folks. It's like
it was such an Illuminati job. It was crazy. Totally
Illuminati. And man, that's why I really am trying to correct. I'm almost 43 years old here. I'm trying to, for 42 years I've been saying Jesus, and I understand the power, and this has been a bit of a dilemma for me, to be honest with you, because I have seen the power of the name of Jesus in my own life, as well as the life of a lot of other people, and Scripture says you shall know them by their fruits. And so the good fruit that I have seen that come from the name Jesus, I cannot deny. But at the same time, I cannot deny that is not his name. His name is Yeshua. But
I've been going through the same thing too. I just read a couple of chapters in that commentary today, and this is really something that does deserve further research. I definitely agree. And the counter is to that is you will know them by their fruit. The Spirit is still dwelling within us. And if something has gone on here throughout time, the enemy's plan seems to be counteracted in the midst of this. So it definitely deserves research. Going through just a couple of things in that commentary today, that was one of the main reasons I just got to that breaking point and said, I know nothing.
Yeah.
It really is.
You got to watch the video of that guy talking and about how he came to know Yeshua and his journey that led him to doing this translation. It's a pretty extraordinary story. The hosts are kind of funny. It's an elderly couple. It's just kind of funny the way they interview him. But he's got a lot of good stuff to say, and I'm going to do my best to try to get him on my show because I really want to talk to him about some of these things. But one of the things I love about the name Yeshua, and some of my listeners have heard me talk about this, but what it translates to, that the hand that destroys the establishment of the eye, of course, being the Illuminati. And when I heard that for the first time, when I first discovered that through a friend of mine showing that to us as we're studying Hebrew, I'm like, wow, that's so amazing, because I believe that the church is the body through which God works on this earth. And like I said, if there's the real deal, you're going to expect to see a counterfeit. So the counterfeit to that is the Illuminati, which I believe is the formal structure through which the devil does his work in this earth. And And his savior is the Antichrist. It is Nimrod. It is Osiris. It is Orion. It is all those guys wrapped up in one individual, the Antichrist, the antithesis of Christ. But the exciting thing for me is that he is the hand that pokes that eye out of our dollar bill, you know.
Yes.
And so it's like once you know the truth, you're accountable to it. And so I'm really, as much as I can see and point to the power of Jesus in my own life and in the life of countless other people that I've interacted with and have personally led to Christ in my missionary journeys around the world, I'm migrating over to the Yeshua side of how I refer to the Son of God now, because the battle is really coming to a head. You know, it is ramping up. You know,
oh, absolutely.
And, man,
and
on one hand, it breaks my heart. What's that? I was just going to say, on one hand, it breaks my heart, but on the other hand, I'm really excited. You know, it breaks my heart because my name is Rob. You know, and if people in their best intentions refer to me as Frank, you know, I can let it go because I know their heart. You know what I mean?
Yes.
But that's not my
Absolutely.
name. And when there's a scripture, several scriptures have always really been sobering to me, where he says, Lord, we did all these things in your name, you know, and he says, depart from me, I never knew you. I'm going, oh, Lord, please don't let that be people. You know, I have to believe it's the Illuminati types that go out there and do things, you know, claiming to be doing it in the name of Christ. But it makes me think, though, you know, throughout the whole Bible, his name is so important to him that, man, if we got it wrong, I'm going, Lord, I don't know. Like you said, it's so humbling and it's terrifying. I just got to say, I just want to know the truth. You know?
Absolutely, and that's where I've just been digging in harder and harder and harder. You know, it's the whole wiping of the entire hard drive. You have to start over from scratch again. I mean, we know the scriptures already, so we know where to cross-reference what branches go where, etc. It just, the pieces are coming together in a lot different of a format than I ever expected. To go to what you were saying, too, it's the days that we're coming into, we have to have every single spiritual weapon at our capacity to deal with what's going to come on the earth. And it is really important that we understand all these different concepts, all these proper, truthful ways of doing things. And this is one thing, you know, with this binding and loosing, for instance, this is one thing I've really been just kind of thinking over in my head, well, where am I going with this? Where is this blog supposed to be ending up? And the more I've been thinking about it, it really is about the days we're coming into, the days of Noah, and what it is that we're going to be facing. And this is what I sent you that message a little while ago. This is something I really started looking over because I noticed it within that word Maseroth. At first I was thinking this was pointing to giving a time signature, a time place, that kind of gives the illusion to the water bearer with Aquarius.
Yes.
Last night I started to think over, wait a minute, because I looked over the meaning of the word again. And the more I started looking at it, I said, flood. Is this talking about flood? A sign of as in the days of Noah.
You're tying the water barrier with the flood. Wow.
And while I'm not seeing it as being Aquarius anymore, what I'm seeing it as being is a warning of as in the days of Noah. Now today, after sitting down and reading the commentary and reading through some of the scriptures in there, I said, I got to pull this apart. I have to bring up the Hebrew and start looking at the surrounding text. And it is. It's exactly what it is talking about. It is talking about in the days of Noah, the days of the flood that will come upon the earth, about the restraining thing being brought up from the abyss. It's Job 38 through 41. The more and more and more I continue to look at this, I am seeing that all three of those chapters are end-time prophecy, and it's wrapped up and it's put within the Hebrew.
Yes.
And the Lord was impressing upon me while I was sleeping last night, there is something else I am not grasping in this, and I need to look even more. And you were talking about confirmations, and I had it. After that show, I went and I read real quickly the chapter on the rapture that he has in there. It's just a couple of pages.
Yeah.
And I couldn't believe it when I got to the end, because what I kept hearing is you need to understand that this is outside of time. You'll be brought into a place that is outside of time. And when I read that, I went, that's the answer. And there is what was it he said? He pointed out that heaven is within, and when this happened, yes, we will go up in a sense, but we're going to come in, and we're going to go into a place that is outside of time, how God dwells and how God exists. And so I'm starting to get a partial answer here. I'm going in the right direction of what it is the Lord keeps telling me to look for. There's still a lot more that I have yet to really dig into these scriptures and really look at the Hebrew.
Well, everybody talks about dying and going to heaven. That's like, in classic Christianese, everybody's looking forward to going to heaven. But when you read the scriptures, that's not our destination. Our destination is here. There may be some things that take place in heaven, but then heaven comes down to earth. We've got a new Jerusalem, and everything's set up shop here. Until He creates a new one, a new heaven and new earth, whatever that looks like. But from everything I'm reading, our destination is here. And when that guy, Andrew Roth, started talking about heaven being more of an in type of thing than an up, have you ever seen the Celestine prophecy?
Celestine prophecy?
Yeah.
I don't know. I know that was one of the things that was floating around.
Yeah, that was
quite
real
some
big
time
back
ago when I was involved in the occult. I don't recall that I really looked into it too deeply.
Yeah, that was something that was kind of real big. It was like The Secret before The Secret came out. This was back in the early 90s that the Celestine prophecy was real big. But they made the book into a movie. I recommend you watch the movie. I get the New Age stuff and everything, but put Yeshua glasses on, okay? Put Yeshua glasses on.
That's the way I watch everything.
Yeah, there's so many things. I'm all about bridges. Whatever I can use as a bridge to walk somebody over to the kingdom, I'm going to use it. It's like Paul became all things to all people so that by some means he might reach a few, it's not saying go out and become a sinner or a warlock or anything else, but if there are things that are out there that are mainstream that you can use as a bridge, then I'm all for it. And so rather than going out and protesting knowing, or some of these other movies that come out and everybody's like, the eschatology is horrible and it's all wrong and it's aliens, I'm like, look, guys, take it for what it is. It's a movie. But use it as a bridge, because there's a lot of stuff in knowing that you can use as a bridge to walk your unsaved friend over to our side of the truth. By bringing them, they will never go to church, but they'll go see a Nicolas Cage movie. But like The Secret, there's nothing new about The Secret. The Secret is they basically just changed God into universe and paraphrased a whole bunch of things Solomon wrote. There's nothing new about it. Man thinks in his heart, so is he. It's a law of attraction. I get it. Oprah makes it famous and everybody's out there and it's all, New Age mumbo jumbo. But put Yeshua glasses on, and essentially what I came to realize is, wow, the world is realizing what the church forgot. That our thoughts do mean things, and that the law of attraction is faith, okay? I mean, that's basically it. And as a man thinks in his heart, so is he. But the movie Celestine Prophecy illustrates a lot of kingdom things. If you watch it with with Yeshua glasses on and listen to some of the dialogue. Especially, there's some dialogue in there that they talk about the kingdom that is pretty powerful. But they illustrate it in such a way, visually, where these two characters, there's this guy and this girl, are sitting in the forest, and they're essentially just exchanging. It's going to sound new agey, but they're basically exchanging love with their aura, if that makes sense. They're projecting love at one another, essentially. But what they do when they do that is the love feeds on the energy of the other person, and it grows to the point where these two characters phase out of this existence into essentially a heavenly existence. They resonate their frequency out of phase with this world. And there's a scene where the bad guys are coming, and they're essentially phased out. You know, they're in another realm. It's like with Jesus. They wanted to stone him to death and throw him off a cliff, and he phased out right in the middle of the crowd.
I have thought that same thing multiple times looking at those scriptures, because you get that exact impression that he just disappears. They try to lay hands on him. I've felt that same thing, and more I've read through those scriptures, I'm going, did he just completely vanish and then appear somewhere else?
He totally did.
It's, what is it, Philip, or who is it that baptizes the Ethiopian, and then all of a sudden he's transported somewhere else?
That's right. So,
just some...
You know, I just think there's so much more to this. And this has been my prayer, actually, going back to 2003 was the end of about a 3-year crucible for me. It was just a very difficult time in my life where God essentially he brought me down to Texas from Massachusetts and got me an apartment, got me a car, and got me a job to pay for it all. And as soon as I got it all, I lost my job. And he basically put me in a position where I had to trust him completely from about March to December of 2003. And essentially all I did was lock myself away in my apartment, cry a lot, read the Bible, and pray a lot. And during that time, God really, really drew near to me. And my prayer became, Lord, if there's more to this salvation experience than what I've been taught my whole life, I want it. I'm open to it. And that was really the catalyst that set me on the journey that I'm on now. And I really do believe there's so much more for us as we get into this, because Jesus, my trump card is John 14:12. He says, anyone, not just Peter, James, and John, anyone who believes in me will do the same works that I've done. Well, does that mean we're supposed to change water to wine and walk on water? I'm like, look, I didn't write it, guys. That's what it says. We'll do the same works that I've done, and
even greater.
And even greater works. What does that look like? You know, I don't even see people doing the first part, never mind the greater part, you know.
Well, this is a dilemma. This is a dilemma I have seen as well, and I've had to really just work on restructuring people's thinking to see what the Word truly says. I've seen situations where it's, well, we need to do this, that, or the other thing, et cetera, and I'm going, all right, look. The Word says this. It says we will heal the sick, we shall cast out demons, we shall trample on the enemy's head. That means we'll do it. Read what's in here, believe it. Read this, your word, nothing else, believe what it says. It is that simple. You know, I was going through a phase where I was going through class after class after class, and I got to the point where it hit me. I'm learning things that I already know, and they're teaching me things that I could learn a lot easier by spending time in the Word and learning from the Spirit while reading the Word and meditate on the Word. So there is a lot of barriers that have come back up in people's thought forms that really to get back on base again. And the end-time church I really see the end-time church is going to be just like that Acts church. It is going to go back to the root. It's going to go back to the way things were meant to operate before Rome came in and tried to gobble us up, and they came away with the Reformation. And the only thing that Luther ended up doing was just changing a little few odds and ends here and there that he didn't like about what they were doing. Well, it needs a complete overhaul at this point.
Right.
And there's still great things going on within the church. There's still miraculous things taking place. There's awesome people with awesome hearts. And I know the Lord wants things back on track, and I think in the midst of this process we're going through right now, with the way the earth is shaking literally, Yeshua is saying, all right, I'm going to tear down the money tables, and I'm going to put things on track here. And he's merciful, and he's graceful, and he's doing it very slowly. So it is a good thing.
Well, you know, it talks about in Malachi that before the great and terrible day of the Lord, Elijah is going to come back. And when you go back and look at what Elijah did the first time he was here, he basically drew a line in the sand and said, choose now who you're going to serve. All this mixing of Torah and Baal worship has got to stop. You know, choose who you're going to serve. You can't have both. And let's see if Baal is really who he says he is. And I love what he does, too, because he was totally jacking with them. There was a ritual that they were practicing, had to do with the Baals and Tammuz and all that stuff, but they referred to him as a sleeping god. And in that ritual, they're trying to wake him up, and that's what Elijah, he's totally taunting him. He's jacking. He's like, oh, maybe he's sleeping. Yell a little louder. Maybe he's gone on vacation. He's totally messing with him. And of course, Baal never shows up, so he calls out to Yahweh, and Yahweh just, you know, demolishes everything, and then Elijah goes on a rampage and kills the 400 prophets of Baal. But if we're looking at what's going on in these last days, there is definitely, I don't know that the individual has shown up yet, but there's definitely the spirit of Elijah has gone out, because just the journey that my wife and I are on that have led us into the Torah, you know, just even the way we refer to the Old Testament. We think, oh, the Old Testament, oh, it's old, it's done away with, we don't need it anymore. You know, words mean things. You know, when you say old, it has the connotation of, you know, the old thing, you know, we got the new over here. And you know, I was raised in a fundamental Baptist church who was very proud of saying, you know, we are an independent fundamental Baptist church, and we are New Testament Bible-believing Christians. And so we spent a lot of time in the New Testament. But with the spirit of Elijah that has gone out, that led my wife and I into a Torah study in December, our life has radically changed. And I posted on my Facebook, I am no longer a New Testament Bible-believing Christian, but I am now a full Testament, because, you know, when it says that the saints were searching the Scriptures, and the Bereans searched the Scriptures to see whether these things be true, they weren't searching the New Testament, because the New Testament didn't exist, which means they were looking at Torah to tell them who Messiah was. And here we are totally dissing the Old Testament. I'm like, no, man, the Old Testament tells us who the Messiah is that we say we believe in. And so I said I'm a full Testament Bible-believing or believer in Yeshua.
Yes.
And I believe that that's the spirit of Elijah going out, that because when you start doing that, you start to realize, wow, Christmas has absolutely nothing to do with Messiah. Easter has nothing to do with Messiah. Sunday doesn't really have a whole lot to do with Messiah. And it's like everything starts to change. And there's nothing wrong with worshiping on Sunday. Worship every day of the week, but sanctify and keep the Sabbath day holy. You know, God was pretty specific about that when you go back in the Torah. And when we started to do that, look, I'm not judging anybody. I'm just saying if you do that, what you're going to find, because that's the day he shows up, you know, that's the day he says he is going to bless and sanctify and make holy. And if you show up on the day that he shows up and honor him on that, that's where we go to our Torah study at 3 o'clock on Saturday afternoon. The study itself lasts for 2 hours. It lasts for 2 hours, so we're done at 5. Then we break bread, and the scriptures say where they were breaking bread on the first day of the week. again, you have to realize the Hebrews start their day at sundown, not sunrise. So the first day of the week for the Hebrews starts on what we would call Saturday evening. And so where it says that they were worshiping and breaking bread on the first day of the week, everybody says, well, see, that's proof of Sunday. No, we're still on Saturday, at least by our reckoning. But what has happened for us is we start breaking bread and eating, and we continue to share what we have learned in the previous 2 hours to the point where we go home at 1, 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. So we've literally spent 12 hours in the Word of God, totally jacked out of our mind. We leave because our eyeballs are rolling in the back of our skull and we have to go to sleep. Because God is showing us stuff, and it's like I think that when we understand the full Testament and when we embrace Yahweh's plan and Yeshua, that maybe the power that we're seeking will be released.
Yep. Now, here's another thing with that Malachi prophecy, is they will turn the hearts of the children back to the fathers and the fathers back to the children.
Right.
And the way I like how this person with this Aramaic English New Testament stated this is he called it the renewed covenant. And this is something I had been thinking over for a while, because you look at the situation where you had Adam, and then you move forward to Enoch. And if you look at the story of Enoch in Jasher, he was spending like a week on end. I'm not even sure how long in these caves. And he was just doing nothing but spending time with the Lord. He knew the commands to keep. And then he would come out and he would teach these commands to others. And they would pass on and continuing. Well, after the flood, it was passed on to Noah. Noah kept it alive. And then you come to Abraham. And if you look in Jasher, you see where Abraham came and spent a considerable amount of time with Noah. So again, you had the same things passed along. And when you start looking at the different covenants that are made, blessings that are passed through all of the patriarchs in Genesis, you start seeing this reoccurring theme over and over and over again. The covenants were always pointing to Messiah, no matter how you looked at it. And it continued to keep building in that pattern. And that was one thing that really started to stick out to me, is these people, they were living by faith. They were living by faith through grace. And so that was the thing that I really started to grasp too, is it was a renewed covenant. The original covenant was set in place with Genesis 3 when the fall took place. And it just kept repeating. And the more and more you keep looking at these things, you just keep seeing that repeating pattern. That was one of the real fascinating things I noticed about the Manasseh and Ephraim covenant and Joseph, is they had the same echoing pattern. And you could see that already the Lord had a plan in place where he was going to bring redemption to all of the people of the earth. They even continue through these bloodlines. When you start looking at these things this way, it seems like it opens up more and more and more understanding into these things.
It does. I mean, really, all the revelation that I've had in the last 5 months came as a result of getting back into the Torah. And, it's weird, man. It's like we believe that the Bible is divinely inspired by God, that God inspired the writers of each of the books of our Bible. But it seems to me that the Torah stands even above that. Not to diminish the inspired works at all, but the Torah was personally dictated to Moses by God, on the mountain. It's not just inspiration. It's, hey, Moses, write this.
I want to tell you about this real quick. Finish what you're saying. I got to tell you about this. Go ahead.
No, I'm done. That's just the point I'm making, is that there's so much power in the Torah, I believe, because of that,
Well, with Moses, too, he was the forerunner with the Torah. And if you look, who followed right after Moses? It was Joshua. which that translates over to the same name. Now, I caught something really, really, really strange when I was reading through Exodus last week. And I have always come to understand that Moses went up that mountain alone.
No,
there
Joshua
is the one spot, and it just sits there in the middle. And Joshua goes up with him. I'm going, wait a minute here.
Well, there's another one where it says that Moses met with God in the tent of meeting, and it says that he spoke with God as one speaks to a friend face to face. And Moses leaves, and Joshua stays.
Yep. There's another one. I just was thinking about it. Go ahead. It'll pop back to mind if it's important.
Well, I'm just saying that, and I have always loved the character of Joshua. I just think he's just awesome.
Yeah.
You know, he's a warrior. He's amazing, but he totally took the mantle of Moses after Moses died, you know, and carried it.
Yep.
In fact, the very first thing he had to do is, and I'm going to write a blog about Shechem, because Shechem is an amazing place. I don't know if we have time to really get into it right now, but Shechem is pivotal throughout the Bible. So many things take place in Shechem. And if you go on Google Earth and look up Shechem, you got Mount Gerizim to the south and Mount Ebal to the north. And it looks like there were once a complete mountain range that somebody just gouged out the middle. And so they form, if you like take your hands and like kind of make like a cup out of your hands and connect them together so that you got like this middle part there. It's like a natural amphitheater that where the gouge is. The city of Shechem is in the middle. That's where God told, where Joshua was told to go as soon as they crossed over into the Promised Land, was to go and stand in Shechem and put half of the tribes of Israel on Mount Gerizim and the other half of the tribes on Mount Ebal. And the tribes on Gerizim had to pronounce the blessings, and the tribes on Ebal had to pronounce the curses. And he had to rewrite the law on plaster tablets. So, you know, right off the bat, I mean, as soon as Moses dies, it is clear that Joshua is the new Moses.
Wow. That's incredible. There's so much. And Old Testament, we'll keep it Old Testament. But even today when I got this Aramaic English New Testament, when I'm sitting there with it, I'm going, but I want the old right now. I want the old.
Yeah.
So I'm really going to start plugging into learning Hebrew right now as well. I picked up that book, and I really, really, really want to learn the Hebrew now and just start reading it as much as I can from there. That's going to be a lengthy process. I mean, one other thing, too, is coming back to what you were talking about with the Sabbath and Saturday, is I've really been trying to get together with a group of like-minded people that are starting to understand these things. And it's slowly, I think some people are coming along here. So let's keep praying on this one. But it is really, really an eye-opening. Yeah.
It really is. And, you know, this whole Loose the Bands of Orion and the sweet influence of the Pleiades, we haven't really talked about this. We've just been all over the place tonight. But like I said, tonight's just informal. But I was thinking about it because I was looking at your blog while you were talking. And Tom Horn and Steve Quill did a great show a while back, a couple of years ago, actually, talking about the Kassetot. Are you familiar with that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a magical band.
Yeah, that snares the souls of men like birds, and they put them in the orca or the kist, the container for the souls. And if you realize Bacchus is another name for Nimrod, it's the Bacchanalian witches. The Bacchanalian witches are associated with the seven sisters, the Pleiades, and these women, apparently, you know, God's talking about, I'm against your magic bands that you use to snare the the souls of men. And it says, and I forget what the address is, I think it's in Ezekiel, but I forget. I have to go look it up. But it says that you use to keep alive that which should be dead, and that you kill that which should be alive, or something like that. It's talking about keeping the things alive that should be dead, and killing the things that are meant to live, you know. And I got to thinking, okay, if these Bacchanalian witches, the Pleiades, the seven sisters, are associated with Bacchus, and Bacchus is Nimrod, what if, here's my hypothetical, what if they immediately came to his aid after his head was cut off and slapped one of those bands around his arm? Now think about this. It sounds pretty crazy at first, but if you think about it, every giant you see in mythology and the genies popping out of the bottle and all that, they always got that gold band around their bicep. Right? So what if Nimrod's got Orion? Now, make the connection of Nimrod and Orion. Orion's got this band around his arm that is meant to keep alive that which is supposed to be dead, and essentially suspended animation.
Yep.
And the sweet influence of the Pleiades, I mean, all the ancient monuments, everything's lined up with the Pleiades. I mean, they're trying to do something. And mummification really dates back to the time that Nimrod was killed, and Isis, and all of that. You know, he's the first Frankenstein. I mean, truly, I've started calling Nimrod Frankenrod. He's Frankenrod. Because if you look at Mary Shelley's original Frankenstein story, it is the Nimrod story. It is totally the Nimrod story.
Yep. I cannot remember the name of that text that it was taken from. She had supposedly found some ancient text inside of some underground cavern. I'll have to go back and look at that. I think Tom Horn references that in Apollyon Rising. And
yeah, that was the Cumaean Sibyl.
That's it.
And so I'm like, okay. Go ahead. Hello?
Hello?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Hello?
I'm just thinking, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm just thinking, what if, you know, my theory is that basically whatever was dug up in the Iraqi desert, Gilgamesh, may have been the body with the Kasetot wrapped around his arm that is going to get lowered into the Giza Plateau in the secret chamber to fulfill Jesus' Matthew 24 scripture. And that somehow that band is going to get loosed when God says, okay, fifth angel, go ahead, blow your trumpet. You know, if that's what they want, let them have it. Because right after the fourth trumpet, you got an eagle flying that says, whoa, whoa, whoa.
Yep.
I mean, we could take that to our modern vernacular, like, whoa, 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 guys, something bad's about to happen here. Because it says, woe to the inhabitants on earth for what's going to happen when the next three trumpets blow, 5, 6, and 7. 5 blows, and the angel is given the key to the shaft of the bottomless pit. And then, you know, maybe something happens because all the Giza Plateau is all lined up for the Pleiades, that the sweet influence of the Pleiades finally takes shape. Maybe it's one of the angels that are held there that it's released, that undoes the band of Orion at the time Apollyon rises at the 5th trumpet. Because right after that is the 6th trumpet. And the connection between Apollyon, now get this, I was having the hardest time, I know Apollyon is sometimes a derivative of Apollo, but I was having a hard time connecting Apollo to Nimrod and all the other personalities that Nimrod's associated with, because Apollo seems to be this kind of almost feminine, you know, he's the god of music and poetry and the arts and all that. I was having a hard time reconciling Apollyon with all the other deals, but when the connection was made that the locusts come out first, if you look at the myth of Apollo, he was also associated as the giver and stayer of plagues and pestilence. And pestilence is associated with locusts. So there's your connection right there, because he says the locust, that Apollyon is the king over the locusts. So there's your connection. Boom, right there. Boom, Nimrod Apollo connection to the locust right there. Then the fifth trumpet blows, and now all of a sudden you got the exact position of Joel 2's army let loose. And this is the Nephilim hordes coming out at this point. Like I said, if you add the Nephilim equation and the Nimrod mythology equation to the tribulation timeline, science fiction has nothing on this. It's going to be one heck of a wild, scary, freaky time, but I can't help but think that the statement that God makes in Job, can you loose the bands of Orion and the sweet influence of the Pleiades and all that, that it is directly tied to that.
It is, and that's when I'm pulling up Hebrew, there is a direct reference to something being removed from the abyss. And when I saw that today, because I've noticed a few times over the last couple of weeks, just going through it in the standard English, I'm going, there's end time prophecy in here all over the place. And what you just brought up about the alignments with the pyramids and with the Pleiades, and that specific date, and that's the one thing that I was seeing too, is you've got that 33-degree angle arc with the moon.
Oh, man.
And that thing is going to hit right into that shaft. I'm really starting to get led to believe that indeed the pyramid is going to be that place. And it's one thing I keep thinking about these pyramids is, yes, they never found, or so they say they never found any bodies in them. And one thing I started to think is, was this thing some sort of ancient resurrection technology that they've been using?
Now notice that the tomb of Osiris is between the middle pyramid, which is not the Great Pyramid. Everybody thinks it is because it looks like it's taller. That is not the Great Pyramid. The middle pyramid, the tomb of Osiris is between the middle pyramid and the Sphinx. All of that appears to be of Nephilim activity, origin, and end-time prophetic stuff. The Great Pyramid is off to the side. It's slightly lower on the plateau, so it has the illusion of being smaller, but it is actually bigger. The Great Pyramid, what is amazing to me about the Great Pyramid is it's the gospel in stone, as far as I can tell. But the inner dimensions of the sarcophagus, every secular and otherwise, everybody agrees there was never a body in the king's chamber. The inner dimensions of the sarcophagus in the king's chamber is the same dimensions as the outer dimension of the Ark of the Covenant.
Yep.
So I've always wondered, okay, if this thing was here first, probably pre-flood, and my theory is that it probably once contained all 365 tablets of Enoch at one point, that it was the housing of the tablets of Enoch.
That is one thing I have been considering lately, and I did stumble on, I've had a book sitting here for quite some time. I've never read the thing because I popped it open, and this is from, of course, it's coming from the Masonic side, but it's, Richard Gardner and something Lawrence. And they were talking about that they've ended up tracing that the Masons trace back to Enoch, to the Book of Enoch, is where they started diving into, and they're trying to figure these things out, obviously, and how they work and what's going on here. And when you start really looking at all of this different symbolic stuff that they're using, you keep seeing those 7 stars nonstop, or you will see a 7-star reference. I was looking at, after I discovered that in the Book of Enoch a couple weeks ago, it was about a month and a half, 2 months ago, I started going through, I bought this book on alchemy and mysticism a long time ago that's just nothing but pictures, and it's got little explanations in it. And one of the major alchemy things that was done up, in the middle of each and every one of these things, it had a 7-pointed star, and then you would see a phoenix going up and down. And I'm going, okay, this can't be nothing here. Because I've always been picking up on the fact that this is one of the ways that they kept this ancient sciences alive, these ancient genetics, the physics that we're starting to see them use now. I don't think this is nothing more than resurrected ancient tech that they're using now with the CERN project, with the scalar weapons. It's nothing but a repeat. It's the whole thing taking place again.
You just brought something up with CERN. Well, go ahead and finish your thought, but I want to go back to CERN.
The CERN, I know exactly where you're going to go with this, the Saturn connection. And bring that up.
I got to wondering recently, my wife had found some great videos. She's always finding great videos. She's like the video queen. But she found some great videos on the Saturn-CERN connection. And we were watching stuff, and we were talking about it, just kind of talking it through. And the idea came up, what if CERN is actually old tech that we found and not built, and maybe reassembled or put, but what if it was always there? And as we were thinking about that, Fringe, the last episode of Fringe, or the last 2 or 3 episodes of Fringe, I don't know if you've been watching that, but man, the others that built the machine that the guy gets into was buried. It was old tech left by the ancient ones, you know, and it was all about bridging universes and all that stuff, and we're like, okay. Man.
Yeah, this is everything that they're doing now. It has to be this ancient technology. There's just no way to get around this. I mean, they are opening gates. They're opening portals using this technology, and I am fairly certain it started by accident. If you've read enough into, I believe, what is it, the Philadelphia experiment or the Manhattan Project, I don't remember, the one with the boat that they used the Tesla technology, and they fired the thing off thinking it was a stealth, and all of a sudden, bam, they disappeared and went somewhere else.
Yeah,
I mean,
the guys came back they came back like half in the bulkhead and half out of the bulkhead. And
they've tried to pull such a cover job on this that I almost believed one of the documentaries I saw, but the more I started looking into this thing, and did you read about the book that went side by side with the guy that was really sending he was sending him stuff about the Philadelphia experiment. This guy started writing stuff about the UFOs at the same time. All of a sudden, this strange book starts coming forward.
Yeah.
And when you start looking at some of the things that are said in those conversations, there's a big cover job going on there.
Huge.
There was another incident now. I was reading in the David Hatcher Childers put out a compilation of different parts about the electromagnetic grid. And there was an incident that happened when a Japanese airliner was traveling through one place. All of a sudden they hit this spot on the grid, and it was because they linked it so that there was actually a certain star alignment during a precise time that caused them to end up somewhere else.
Whoa.
So, it all ties together somehow, and that's one of the things I'm trying to kind of connect the dots with all of this. It goes back to that Tower of Babel, that essential gate of God, I think, has a massive amount of the answers that really tie into this whole equation.
A couple of things I was thinking about. It's interesting that in Revelation, I mean, right off the bat, there's a mention that Jesus is standing there with 7 stars in his right hand.
Yep.
I'm like, I know he talks about that being the lampstands and the churches and all of that, but he also says, the 7 stars are the angels of the 7 churches, and the 7 lampstands are the 7 churches in Revelation 1:20. But it just seems awfully curious to me that you've got these parallels. You got the 7 sister stars, the Pleiades, it's mentioned throughout the Old Testament, and then you've got the depiction of Jesus there with 7 stars on his right hand.
I don't know. It seems like it's a counter.
Yeah, I don't know what the connection is.
It's a counter to the.
Well, when he starts talking about the 7 churches, and it says, when he gets to Pergamum, where Satan's seat is, something going on there because, And then, of course, Satan's seat gets moved to Berlin prior to World War I. And they set up a big museum for it. And then they, after World War I, that museum wasn't good enough, so they built a bigger one, the current one, and they put the Ishtar Gate of Babylon right beside it. So you got the Ishtar Gate of Babylon right next to Satan's seat, and then Obama goes there and, oh, wow, isn't this great? I love this. I think I'll make that my backdrop in Denver, Colorado for my acceptance speech. You know, there's so much tied into all these things. They're all interwoven together, and it's like I'm a visual person, so I think of this as a puzzle, and I had this image in my head of like this 5,000-piece puzzle, you know, and this one and the camera's looking down on the person making this picture, and he grabs the last piece of the puzzle, and he's like, yeah, and he pushes the last piece of the puzzle into the picture, and when he pushes it, the picture shrinks and becomes one piece, and he's got all these empty pieces around him. He's got to put together another picture, you know, and every time he puts the last piece in, that last piece makes the whole picture into one piece of another picture. You know what I'm saying? It's like that's where we are right now. One thing building on another.
Yeah.
And I'm just excited to know people like you and Dory and L.A. Marzulli and Dante and King Wells and Matthew and all these people that have, it just seems like, at least from my perspective, we all just came together fairly recently. At least I did. I entered into the mix about 5 months ago, I guess, with these people. But it's extraordinary because everybody's got a piece of those puzzles, you know.
Yes, and that's the part I love. Is we're all given these little pieces, and we have communications through messages or whichever takes place, read some things on each other's blogs, and all of a sudden more pieces come into place. And it's the one thing I've seen quite clearly with this is when I really started digging into some of these things after that lunar eclipse, it's going back to the coincidence thing, isn't it? The answers literally were starting just to drop into my lap. I mean, I would find a book here in the house and I open it up to a random page, some book that I haven't seen for 10 years, all of a sudden sitting in front of me. For instance, right after the lunar eclipse, they're sitting in front of me explaining the entire cosmology of the number 72 from the biblical perspective. Yeah. I'm looking at this and I'm going, you've got to be joking. The next day I open up the book with Perry Stone, Breaking the Jewish Code, and I open up and I'm reading there, and Babel is Akkadian for Gate of God.
Yes. I'm
just sitting here looking at this. I'm going, this is incredible. And it's even been within the research, when digging through different websites looking for answers, the same thing happens. And you know the Lord is doing this. He's just he's connecting the dots and he's helping us along and showing us these things that we need to know in these days.
Yeah. You hit on something the other day that blew my mind, and I've got to go deeper because it triggered some things that I had going on in my head already. But when you made the connection that the Pleiades were visible from Antarctica, the South Pole, in the time of Enoch, can you talk a little bit about that and your journey that led you to that realization and the Enoch address?
This, well, that was, set the record straight on this. I had to go through and revise the blog several times to make sure that the guy that wrote this got the due credit for it. And his site is excellent. I haven't looked right underneath that section. This was written by a guy named, I'm trying to pull it down here as fast as I can. The guy's name is Leafstrom, I think is what that says. And he did all the legwork on this. I ended up finding this after I noticed that in Enoch. I decided, because I was trying to put all the pieces together and figure out how can I confirm this is the 7 stars, and finally I gave up and just said, all right, Google, show me what I need to find. And this guy did all the legwork on this. Now, I went back. I always confirm my sources. I've just gotten that way with the way so much thing, with the way the media plays with this and stuff. And I went back in and I double-checked it to make sure this was accurate. Now, what he brought up there about the South Pole and the Arctic, something that I find really, really fascinating, because there's a little bit more going on in there, and it talks about in Job, about in those last days, the reserves. Let me find the exact reference. It talks about the hail coming forth from that place, from the deep reserves in that day. Let's see, which one is this? And I guess just to go forward with this is something that really got me thinking about this going on in the Arctic. And we had that really, really nice piece dropped in our lap with that movie that was just released, because that Norse mythology really does hold answers in this. And I'm starting to understand why Nazi Germany had such fascination and headed right towards the Arctic as well. So,
yeah, because Hitler basically he destroyed Christianity in Germany and revived the old Scandinavian Norse mythology. And I told you the other day that I've always been fascinated by the Norse mythology, but I wasn't writing anything about it because I didn't see how it had any impact on the Scripture. I could see the Sumerian, Babylonian, Egyptian, and Greek mythologies all over the Bible. I couldn't see anything in the Norse mythology. But then this movie Thor comes out, which I thought it was just an enjoyable movie, just as it was. But it was loaded. I mean, it was loaded with symbolism and memes all over the place, and it really got me thinking. And there's a documentary that the History Channel had done called Clash of the Gods, and they did a whole segment on the Norse mythology. And man, the Ragnarok is the Norse mythology's version of Revelation. It's their revelation. It's called Ragnarok. And in Ragnarok, the gods die. They fight each other and kill each other off. And I'm going, that's what made me start to think about the civil war that I believe the Antichrist is going to come up against in the last days. And I wrote about that in my Tribulation blog. That it's not just God's wrath being poured out. There's a civil war that takes place. And when you factor in the Norse stuff, which deals with the Arctic and everything, and specifically their version of hell was essentially a cold place.
Yeah.
The ice giants. And so everything that's going on in the Arctic. Anyway, I don't want to go on a rant here. I want you to talk about the South Pole and the Enoch thing again, but I think it's definitely related, and the Norse mythology has a lot to say about it.
Yes, it definitely does. I'm trying to find, okay, this is the one, has you entered into the treasures of the snow, or have you seen the treasures of hail, which I have reserved against the time of trouble, against the day of battle and war. And you look through this is talking about the end time judgments. This hail it comes up in the different judgments that go on during Gog and Magog and within Revelation. Right. It's a real key marker to kind of show you how those line up. And you've got it coming out of these cold places. You shaft of the abyss, and just all kinds of strange references. And those references are in here in Job in the Hebrew as well. And it's just, the more I keep looking at these passages, I can't believe the depth. But the Lord, when he came down and spoke with Job, I cannot believe how much really was sitting in these last 3 chapters that really does tie into end-time prophecy. And what is it, this Admiral Byrd thing that took place right after, what was it, right around in World War II or after World War II?
It's right after World War II, and it was the beginning of all the UFO sightings, beginning with Roswell, but going all the way to the famous, when he returned with his report from Antarctica, he basically said, look, in future wars, we're going to have to be prepared for ships that can go from pole to pole, like, in minutes. And he recommended that all nuclear bomb testing be done in Antarctica. And right when they were about to sign that into officially into law, there was a massive UFO sighting over the Capitol building in 1952, if I remember right. It basically said, no, don't be blowing up no nuclear bombs over us. And they never signed it.
Well, this, trying to think a second here. I had something and now kind of erased from my mind. Well, too, that is a big thing. I started connecting the dots on this when this radioactivity started coming out with Fukushima. I had stumbled on an article that was talking about these radioactive particles damaged the electromagnetics and the electromagnetic grid, and that's how these different weapons work. And if you recall correctly, when they had the race for the nuclear weapons, you had these people in Germany that were trying to get it first, and I can't recall if this is correct or not, but I could have sworn that Einstein may have been working with them and defected and got out of there and came over to America. It's been a long time since I saw the history on that.
Yeah, Project Paperclip is definitely something that you really got to look at, because that's how so much of everything that we have took place as a result of Project Paperclip, bringing these guys over here.
Well, yeah, and the nuclear weapons is, I started to just kind of think, was this what broke the veil? Was this what opened up and really started things swinging even further forward? And I connected all the dots with 33-degree parallel, and the amount of buildings that are built on there is amazing.
Yeah.
And when I'm connecting the dots and looking through this, then I noticed they were testing all the nuclear weapons on that same 33rd parallel, and where they dropped them in Nagasaki and Hiroshima were on close to that same 33-degree parallel. And then we had the Roswell incident that took place shortly after at that same time, and like you've stated, and then, the Shepherd boy comes along and breaks open this cache with all these scrolls, and there's Enoch. This is something I just learned a couple of days ago, and I don't really know how to confirm this. The Qumran sect was thought to possibly be ones that were aligned more following after the teachings of Enoch. Now, if that is really true, that is some real interesting and neat stuff. I would like to try to find some way to validate and verify it.
Yeah, definitely. There's something that occurred to me when I was looking at your deal about the Antarctic and seeing the Pleiades on the horizon. And I don't think Stellararium takes this into consideration, but if it appeared on the horizon on Stellararium, that's basically assuming, I believe, that the Earth was the same size that it is today. But I believe prior to the flood, the Earth was about half the size that it is right now. Have you ever done any research on the expanding Earth theory?
Somebody just said something about that in the discussion the other day, and it really got me thinking, that's for sure. I kind of would not mind checking into that. I know I still would like to sit down and watch these as well. There's a series that Jim Wilhelmsen has done on the Hollow Earth that I would like to look at, too.
Yes, it was his stuff that got me on that trail. But what's interesting is I've got a world map in front of me. It's like a big wall poster. Everybody likes to make the connection that, the continents look like they fit like a puzzle through, in the Atlantic Ocean. You can see how South America fits into Africa. But what they don't realize is that not only do the continents fit together in the Atlantic, but they also fit together in the Pacific, the North, and the South. You can totally see how Australia once fit into Antarctica, and they all fit from every direction. The only way that is possible is if the Earth was smaller. For Pangea to have connected north, south, east, and west in every side, it means that the Earth had to have been smaller. And when you read scriptures like where it says, hell hath enlarged itself to receive thee at thy coming, I believe, think about this. If the entire earth is covered with water, where does the water go? There's no place for the water to go. You know, the only way that if the entire earth at the flood was covered with water, the only place for the water to go is out of the atmosphere, because there's nowhere for it to drain, you know, unless you expand the earth. If you expand the earth and the continents split apart, then all of a sudden you got this big open place called we call now the Atlantic Basin or the Pacific Basin, that the water rushed off the land into and became the oceans that we have today. So if the earth is half its size, then your view of the heavens just, you know, your field of view just enlarged significantly.
Wow.
See what I'm saying? So Pleiades probably was a lot more viewable than just on the horizon. I think Stellarium just assumes that the Earth is the same size.
Well, I had what I did too is I pulled out and I removed just the scope out view with the planet and looked at all the different alignments with the planets, and there's really peculiar stuff going on with that exact time put in. Viewing from that place, there's a lot of weird alignments going on, and I haven't sat down yet and really, you know, pulled it apart and looked at it too heavily, but I know when I pulled it up and saw it, I was going, this is wild. Did you catch the photo I took about the nose flood at that time when I plugged the nose?
I know, that's, man, we got like 45 seconds left. So we're going to have to do this again, bro. We're definitely going to have to do this again. We got 30 seconds left. Listen, Brian, thank you. Thank you so much for coming on tonight, and well, we're definitely going to have to do this again. All right, bro, I'm going to have to sign off. I enjoyed it. Thanks a lot. We'll do it again. Thanks, man.
Bye.
Thanks so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video presentation. If you did, please subscribe to my YouTube channel, like the video, and share it on your favorite social media sites. There's a lot more to come, so stay tuned, and we'll see you back next time.